Hi, and welcome to the Calaveras County Assessor's Candidate Forum on Inside View. I'm your host, Joel Metzger, and I'll be moderating the forum this evening. We have two candidates, the incumbent Leslie Davis and the challenger Tim Mutertes. Tim owns Realty World in Arnold, and just wanted to welcome both of you. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. So we're going to give each of you a chance to make a 3-minute opening statement. We're going to start with Leslie, and then we'll come over to Tim, and we'll get into some questions. So Leslie, go ahead.
Thank you, Joel. And thank you to Public Access TV for the opportunity to speak tonight. Thanks, too, to all of you who are tuning in and watching what we have to say. I know that your time, like your tax dollars, is very valuable. It's been an honor to serve the residents of Calaveras County for the past 18 years. I came to Calaveras in 2000 as an Appraiser 3 and worked my way up to Assistant Assessor. I've served as Assessor since January 2009 when Randy Metzger retired, and I was first elected to the role in 2010. I'm certified by the State Board of Equalization as an advanced appraiser for property tax purposes. I hold the SRA designation from the Appraisal Institute, and I have a master's degree in public administration. Over the years, we've faced some challenges. Through it all, I've kept our focus on the people who we serve. I've helped taxpayers affected by the recession by lowering the values of more than 20,000 properties in the county. I help Butte fire survivors by lowering values on more than 2,000 affected properties, by personally visiting evacuation centers and answering questions, and keeping the office open at night and on weekends. I've streamlined the disabled veterans exemption process and helped develop the statewide online system for public access to filing required forms. I also, in an attempt to help a little bit of economic development, hosted a conference for all county assessors in Murphys last summer. I'm proud of my staff and their ability to provide professional and respectful service to the public. When I first came to Calaveras County, our assessment roll was a shade over $3 billion. By 2007, it had reached $7 billion. As we all know, the roll was affected by the recession and the fire. But I think this year we're going to top that $7 billion again. During the campaign, I've been asked, why should the assessor be elected? I can answer that this way. The assessor should be independent of special interests. This includes the influence of Board of Supervisors members who want more money to spend on their priorities or more attention for their campaign supporters. The assessor should be fair so that all taxpayers are treated the same. The voters were asked if they thought the assessor should be elected in the late 1980s and responded by a 3-to-1 margin with a resounding yes vote. I'm committed to working in your best interest by administering property tax law in an independent, honest, and fair manner. It's my goal to improve our services and work through the backlog caused by budget cuts and the disasters we've experienced. I need your support to make that happen, and I ask for your support and your vote on June 5th.
Thank you, Leslie. Tim, over to you for your 3-minute opening statement.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. My name is Tim Mutertes, and I'm running for the position of Calaveras County Assessor. I've lived in the county for 47 years. My wife and I have raised 3 children who are now raising our 5 grandchildren here in the county. I've been an EMT, a firefighter, a first responder. I'm in my 40th year in business as a real estate broker. I also currently serve on the Calaveras County Council of Governments, as well as the Assessment Appeals Board. I also serve on an advisory committee to the building department. In my career, I spent 23 years as a state director, sponsoring legislation that was pro-property rights, as well as candidates who were pro-property rights. I'm also currently the president of the Calaveras County Association of Realtors Charity, which played a pivotal role in the Butte fire, contributed over $550,000 to the fire victims, and I spent 6 weeks, along with my wife, working in the evacuation center helping those victims. And during that time period, it came to light that there were issues within the department, and that's why I'm running. So I have a long history of volunteerism in the county, starting in the 80s, going all the way up through the Butte fire. The issues in the department have not only affected my industry with the lack of the transfers, the backlog of transfers, but that's also money that belongs in the coffers of the county that we desperately need. and that is why I'm running.
Okay. Tim, thank you very much. Appreciate that. So on to the first question, and we're going to start with you, Tim. What are your qualifications and experience that qualify you to be
I'm glad
assessor?
you brought that up, because there have been rumors floating around that I'm not qualified. But based on the Business and Professions Code and based on the Elections Office, I am qualified. My experience in 40 years as a real estate broker. I'm also holding a national mortgage license. So I am qualified, and I am on the ballot.
Okay. Leslie, what are your qualifications and experience for the assessor position?
I've worked in two California County Assessor's offices, Contra Costa and Calaveras, and I've owned and operated my own appraisal and right-of-way consulting firm. I started my career as a junior appraiser and worked my way up the ranks in Contra Costa, learning to appraise residential, apartments, commercial, and industrial properties. Along the way, I was the assessor's representative before the appeals board for 2 years in a county where appeals were being filed in the thousands, not just in the tens of appeals every year. I hold an advanced certificate as an appraiser for property tax purposes issued by the BOE, and I have an SRA designation from the Appraisal Institute. I'm a product of public schools. I have an AA from a California community college, I have a bachelor's degree, and I have a master's of public administration from Cal State East Bay. Since coming to the county, I've worked my way up from the appraisal ranks through to management and have been involved in departmental budgeting since 2002. I've also served as a member of a number of committees. I was appointed by the State Controller John Chung, as well as Betty Yee, to the State Controller's Committee on Property Tax Collecting Procedures. I'm on a number of committees with the California Assessors Association. I'm on the county's Debt Advisory Committee and on the Treasury Oversight Committee, and I currently chair the county's Deferred Compensation Plan Administrative Committee. It's been an honor to serve the taxpayers of Calaveras County in all of those capacities for these past 9 years.
Thank you, Leslie. Next question, looking to the future, what are the 3 biggest challenges that you see the assessor's office facing?
Well, Joel, I think the office faces 2 major challenges, not 3. Challenge number 1 is that we really don't have the staffing to get all of the work done, and challenge number 2 is working through the backlog. Now, many things play into those challenges. We also have issues with departments that do not use databases that talk well or play well with each other, and we get data that is either not available or that has to be hand entered into systems because those computer systems don't talk to one another. I'm really proud that my staff has been innovative and have found ways to work around most of that, but the 2 biggest issues that I will be working on in the coming years will be recovering from the budget cuts and increasing the staffing so that we can clear up the backlog.
Thank you, Leslie. Tim, what are the 3 biggest challenges you see the assessor's office facing in the coming years?
Well, the challenges, or maybe I should respond by telling you what my goals are. I see the issues in that office. First and foremost, we need to bring customer service back. Secondly, with a 42% turnover rate in staff, we need to improve the working environment there. Okay. Additionally, we need to streamline the process of dealing with the folks with appeals. They shouldn't have to wait up to 4 years to have their voices heard. So those would be my goals.
Okay. We all were impacted by the Butte fire. Countywide, doesn't matter where you lived, we all were impacted by that fire. How did the Butte fire impact the assessor's office, and how is the assessor's office going to continue to be impacted by the Butte fire moving forward? Starting with you, Tim.
Well, my wife and I spent 6 weeks in the evacuation center, and I know they were impacted because we were not only dealing with trying to find rental housing for the displaced folks, but the ones that owned properties that were destroyed or damaged, we were printing out their profiles and allowing them to take that to the assessor's office, trying to hopefully streamline the process. So I know that staff, everybody was working around the clock, 12 and 14 hours a day, 7 days a week for quite some time. We were there for 6 weeks. So.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Leslie, Same question. How was the assessor's office impacted by the Butte fire, and how will it continue to be impacted moving forward?
Okay, thank you, Joel. But before I answer how the Butte fire affected the office, I do want to respond to two comments that Mr. Munity's made. One is that there's been a 42% turnover in the staff. That's simply not true. In the last 12 months, I've lost one person to a local government agency with a 20% salary increase. That is not 42% of 14 people. And his discussion about handling appeals in 4 years or less, state law requires that they be handled in 2 years, and we certainly do handle all appeals within 2 years. How the fire affected the assessor is both on a personal level and on a work level. When the fire hit, about 50% of my staff were under mandatory evacuations, and 2 of my staff members came back to their homes to find they had burned to the ground. So on a very personal level, my staff was dealing with the day-to-day issues of having coworkers who were dealing with the immediate aftermath of the Butte fire. In terms of the workflow, Butte fire increased the workflow by quite a bit, and in fact, it put us about 20 months behind, because that's how long it took us to weed through all of the reports that we had been given, go out in the field and make personal inspections to ensure that we were giving all of the property owners who were affected the proper tax relief. And because it took us that long with the short staffing that we had, that has created an exponential increase in the backlog that we've been experiencing.
Okay. Similar question about cannabis in the county. The Board of Supervisors has gone back and forth on emergency regulations and then a ban. How has that impacted the assessor's office? And moving forward, how do you expect that it will impact it depending on how the board decides to regulate or not regulate cannabis?
In terms of how the cannabis issue has affected our office, as you know, in order to be a registered cannabis cultivator, those individuals had to get a business license. And part of the process of getting a business license is coming into our office and filling out paperwork so that we can properly assess the operation. Many people don't know, but I'll just say it now. The plant itself is not accessible. However, the business equipment and the construction on the property required to grow the plant is accessible. So the questions that we ask when someone's pulling a business license is, what type of business equipment do you have? What type of new construction are you doing? And how much is it costing to do that? We have been wading through all of those materials, trying to get a feel for what is a real business expense for the cannabis operations. It's impossible to tell what will happen depending on what the board may or may not do. I know there are predictions of doom and gloom because of the ban that maybe the property values will now decrease. We have not yet seen that happen, so it's impossible to say whether or not we're going to see another recession-like reduction in property values. We just keep working through those items that are reappraisable, and that's the new construction, the new business, and the business equipment.
Thank you, Leslie. Tim, same question.
I'm assuming your question more is along the lines of what the future holds regarding cannabis and which direction, and the assessor's office?
Sure.
Assuming that the ban survives legal challenges, I think once the cultivators realize that the legal battle is over, my suspicion is they will leave and that they will try to cut their losses, and you will see their properties go on the market. If that happens, I expect to see those values decline. We won't know that until after the legal challenges are over. As you well know, the Butte fire hit in September of 15. There were still embers smoldering there, and the land grab was still going on. We didn't get the urgency ordinance until February of the next year. That had a negative or an upward impact, obviously, on values because they were buying for it was a bubble in the market. So, like I said, if the legal challenges of the ban survive, I would expect to see in the long term, to see, especially in District 2 in the areas where they're growing, to see those values come back in line with what's normal. So.
Okay. I want to talk about budget with both of you and what budget is currently available and whether that's enough or whether the assessor's office needs more. So if elected, what are your thoughts on that? Do you have enough money coming in to provide the services that you would like to provide? And if you were elected, would you try to make any changes to that?
That's a difficult question to answer because I'm not in that role yet. Obviously, the department's gone through cuts. They had a lot more staff than they do now. My understanding is the 3 positions that were empty have now been filled with entry-level folks, which is a positive movement for the department. Unfortunately, budget cuts are what they are. I mean, even in the private sector, we live with the ups and downturns. Nobody likes to have their budget cut. But I find it to be disingenuous or to stand in front of the supervisors and threaten them to not either, whether it be collect the unsecureds or whatnot, and cause economic harm to the county because your budget's being cut. The supervisors aren't doing that because they want to. They're being forced into doing it. So,
Leslie, do you have the budget necessary for the assessor's office? Would you, if elected, want to make any changes or different requests than what you currently are receiving?
So let's start with no, the budget is not adequate. When I became assessor in 2009, I had 21 full-time employees. 19 were permanent, 2 were temporary. Right now, I have 14, and we dipped as low as 11.2. The reason we have not asked for more staff over the last several years is because administration at the county has asked us to maintain the status quo and not ask for more people. I have been upset watching other departments ignore that request, and this year I am asking for 3 new people. I'm also asking that the board consider the use of the governor's new program that will help finance some of those new employees and the equipment that is needed to bring them on board. We do not have enough people. We have not had enough people. And so it became important during those budget hearings to inform the board what would happen when they reduce that budget. The issue that my opponent is alluding to, and he's calling a threat, was actually an attempt to educate the Board of Supervisors as to the downstream ramifications of their decision. In the year in question, the board had asked for a 10% decrease in the office budget, and I discovered that 8% of our costs were related to producing the unsecured roll. The unsecured roll is less than 2% of that $7 billion number that I mentioned earlier. So it was very easy as a business decision to decide to eliminate that position. The board needed to understand what would happen. So what my opponent perceives as a threat was, in fact, simply telling the Board of Supervisors what was going to happen with every one of their budget cut decisions.
Okay. Thank you, Leslie. What do you see as the primary role and responsibility of an assessor who's elected by the people?
Well, there isn't a primary role. They're established by law. Okay. And underlying all of what is established by law is the need to understand that we provide service to the public and we answer to the voters and taxpayers of Calaveras County. But the job of the assessor is to discover and value all taxable property in the county, to enroll that value on the local assessment roll, deliver that assessment roll to the auditor so she can produce the tax roll, administer property tax exemptions, and maintain assessment maps. And again, throughout the conduct of those state-mandated constitutional responsibilities is the need to remember that we answer to the public, we serve the public.
Okay. Tim?
Obviously, Ms. Davis has already answered the question, but I would go a few steps further. I think it's also your responsibility to protect and nurture your staff. It's also your responsibility to interact with the constituents and to be available because you were put in office by them. So,
Tim, over to you. What is currently not working in the assessor's office, and what specifically would you do to change it if elected?
Well, I kind of touched on that previously, but there's several things that aren't working. Obviously, the backlog. And I want to clarify something. My comment earlier regarding the turnover rate at 42%, that has been confirmed by the CAO, Mr. Lutz. So that is an accurate number. Now, what is unknown at this point is how big the backlog is. The backlog I've heard numbers from as little as 4,000 transfers to as many as 7,000 transfers. Now, if we assume that the average supplemental that would be generated by those transfers was $500, then the missing money from the county coffers in supplementals is going to range from $2 to $3.5 million. That's a lot of money. That money could have been used for the budget process. So now I want to touch on the Butte fire. I realize that the Butte fire impacted everyone, but I think it's important to note that this backlog existed long before the Butte fire. The Butte fire was September of 15. In June of 2012, in June of 2013 and 14, the backlog existed, and Ms. Davis was appearing in front of the supervisors. And multiple times, she can say that that's not a threat in education, but when you say to the supervisors, let me tell you what I'm going to do. Next year I will choose not to fill the 3 positions, and then I will choose not to value boats and not to value planes. And then she turned to the chair and she said, yes, Gary, that means I will not do the unsecured roles. The problem with that is the impact is to the schools, the fire departments, the sheriff's departments, and the special districts. So that's critical. That's well over $1 million. So.
Leslie, what's currently not working in the assessor's office, and what would you do to change it if elected for another term?
Okay, so what's not working is the backlog has been increasing exponentially. Prior to the Butte fire, the backlog was hovering in the 100 to 400 range, depending on what was going on in any given year. So prior to Butte fire, if we all remember, we had a recession, and that recession required that we look at the market value of some 35,000 properties out of 45,000 countywide. That effort took our attention away from the transfers and new construction. My opponent misses the point when he says, if you assume that each of those will add $500 in tax revenue, the county only gets 17% of every property tax dollar raised. So 2/3 of those dollars would have gone elsewhere, and they would not have gone into the county coffers. The other thing I would suggest you do is give Mr. Lutz a call and ask him to sharpen his pencil, because his turnover rate is wrong for this year. What would I change? I am asking the Board of Supervisors to increase my budget. I am asking them to look at a retention schedule, a recruitment and retention schedule for my particular office. As you know, the sheriff's office gets up every year during budget and talks about their difficulty recruiting and retaining staff because of salaries and other benefits. We have a similar problem. I do not disagree that we have a problem recruiting and retaining thanks to the county's salary schedule. So I'm asking for additional staff. I'm asking for salary adjustments. I'm asking for the board to look at that as they adopt the budget this year. And I think that will help us as we move forward to attract some higher level experienced people and work through that backlog.
Okay. So I have time for one more question with 1 minute answers, not 2, and then we're going to go to closing statements. Being a publicly elected official is not an easy thing to do. You take a lot of fire, and it's something that isn't right for everyone, certainly, and isn't really a very easy thing to do many times, even though compensation is good for that. What is it that makes you want to embark on this journey and either continue to be a publicly elected official or go for the first time? And what is it that motivated you to run for this position?
As I mentioned earlier, I started my career in Contra Costa County's assessor's office, and then I left and I went into the public sector and opened my own business. What I discovered as I was self-employed is that I was doing an awful lot of work for people and charging them money for services that they should have received from government. I came back to government because I missed public service, and I continue to be involved in government because of my love of public service. I want to be an elected official so that I can continue to help people. When I'm out and about, I encourage them to come up to me and ask questions. I respond to their questions on Facebook. It's simply something I love doing.
Thank you. And Tim, why are you running for office?
As I mentioned earlier, we spent 6 weeks working in the evacuation center, and we started to hear stories about issues within the assessor's office. And I was also being approached by people here at the county that were saying to me, I should run for this position. As time went on after the Butte fire, and I should state the stories that I've been told are confidential. I'm not allowed to see those files. So, and I've had a lot of people call me and tell me that they have issues. Okay, so I eventually, by about December of 15, had made the decision that I would make this run because the department needs to be fixed. We need to get caught up. We need to get everything funded properly, and we need to make Calaveras County better.
Okay, it's time for closing statements. Tim, we're going to start with you. You have 2 minutes.
Right. I have a lot to learn for this job, but the things I don't have to learn are the following. I don't have to learn how to properly treat staff. I don't have to learn how to properly treat the constituents. I don't have to learn how to be dedicated and committed and to work hard. I already know how to do those things. I've demonstrated those things in my actions over the last 40 years in my community involvement as well as my businesses. So I want your vote on June 5th. I will work hard. I will be dedicated and committed to do a superior job. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Leslie, the 2-minute closing statement.
Well, thank you again for tuning in and listening to tonight's forum. I hope your questions have been asked and answered, but if you continue to have questions, I encourage you to call. My staff and I look forward to helping you with any assessment questions you may have. And if your question is of a political or personal nature, simply send me a message on Facebook or send me a personal email. Over the years, I've been encouraged by many compliments I've received from taxpayers about the service they've received in my office. We know that our job is complicated and difficult to explain, and we also know we're not the most popular public service provided at the county. But I also know that our job is to serve you, the taxpayers, and I believe we've done a good job helping you in a professional and respectful manner. We've all experienced challenging times during the past decade. Through it all, my focus has been on service to the voters and the taxpayers of Calaveras County. I've looked for ways to streamline processes and save taxpayer money while focusing on providing needed tax relief consistent with state law. I've consistently advocated for all taxpayers against attempts at providing special favors. I hope that I've met your expectations. If you want independence, honesty, and fairness along with real expertise, I ask for your vote and your support on June 5th.
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you, Tim, for giving your time to be part of this forum. We really appreciate it. And thank you for watching tonight and for educating yourself for this election. I hope that you join us for the next Candidates Forum. I'm Joel Metzger. Have a good night.